Hello, and welcome to the Wild Blue Podcast, perspectives on aviation lives, lifestyles, and business.
Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Wild Blue Podcast, where we talk about aviation lives, lifestyles, and business. I'm here with Chris Kirk. My name's Todd Mitten, and we are at Wild Blue Aircraft Sales, 888-773-4249 if you'd like to give us a call anytime. Todd at flywildblue.com, Chris at flywildblue.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we're glad you're a listener. Chris, how are you today?
Good. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be back again. We always are trying to think of topics related to anything to do with aviation, because we like talking about aviation, and we hope you like listening to it. I thought today I'd love to hear your thoughts on airplanes wholesaling, retailing, pricing. How do you what should you do if you're interested in selling your airplane? If you're interested in buying an airplane, let's explore this topic a bit.
So we're looking at wholesale related stuff. Is that what we're talking about?
Right, I think so.
So, well, let's give a little quick background here. So Todd now has always fulfilled this role, but it's a little more formalized and a little more of a transition. But Todd is really handling on the acquisition side for us in terms of airplanes that we actually buy and resell. And so not the buyer's agent stuff, but the actual stuff that we're either buying for inventory, sometimes along those lines, or sometimes it may just be something that's outside of inventory that we're actually acquiring.
Right.
So when we're acquiring those airplanes, Todd, we're paying top dollar retail for those, right?
Our dilemma with that is we would lose money if we did it that way. So I think that's what's important for aircraft owners in our audience to understand that are considering a sale of an airplane. Which direction do they want to go? Do they kind of want to go retail, and whether they're selling it themselves or hopefully using Wild Blue to broker an airplane, or is it just easier sometimes to sell their airplane to us and then they're done with their airplane and we'll handle the rest from there? So I think that's what we want to
And that really kind of defines the difference between a broker and a dealer. So a broker is someone who is going to assist you in the sale of your asset, whether it's a house or an airplane. And then the dealer is somebody who's actually owns that asset. And oftentimes the two are, a broker is a dealer and a dealer is a broker, but not always. There's some brokers that only broker. There's a few dealers out there that only will own the airplanes themselves.
And in a way, and the concept is it's not interchangeable.
Right.
Because whether you're talking about a used car dealership, a new car dealership, a boat dealer, any one that sells pre-owned inventory, if they own it themselves, there has to be some room for them to make some money. But is it worthwhile for you as an aircraft owner to sell your valued asset, your aircraft, to a dealer, and what's involved in that? So I thought that would be worth discussing.
So some of the pros maybe on doing that, obviously it's probably going to be a little quicker. There's going to be less. I mean, you're dealing with one buyer, right? On a brokerage, or even if you're just selling your airplane yourself, you're going to talk to a lot of people, and before you find the right one. If a dealer is interested in your airplane and it's something that they typically deal in, it's going to be kind of a one and done deal.
Right, and there's some real advantages to that, in my opinion. Not unlike selling your car to a dealer. That is more and more common. Places like CarMax, for example, will just come and get your car. And in some regards, that's what a dealer can do for you with an airplane, what we can do. Now, it doesn't mean that a dealer isn't going to do his or her due diligence on your aircraft. In other words, a pre-buy inspection. Airplanes, the market is so small relative as compared to, say, cars. I think a car dealer can take your car and have a pretty good idea what it's worth, because things like damage history or quote the, I guess in a car it'd be miles, but that's pretty obvious. But in an airplane, you have hours on the airframe and you have hours on the engine. And then what kind of engine was it? Was it an overhauled engine, a field overhauled engine? Was it a factory new engine? And I could go on and on about examples of why airplanes as individual assets are different than your average individual Toyota Camry. So any dealer is going to have to do some level of due diligence, but that shouldn't make your life too difficult as the current owner of the asset who wants it to move on, wants to reduce your own expenses, your hangar rent, your insurance, the fact that you're not flying the airplane when you should be flying the airplane. It's just so these kind of things, a dealer can solve that problem for you pretty quickly.
Right. And that difference, that margin in the price that a dealer's paying you and what they're going to sell for it, that's not their profit by any stretch. So, there may be, let's take a round number of 15% between what the dealer pays you and what the dealer's willing to sell it for. Well, out of that 15%, they're taking a bit of a gamble, sometimes a big gamble on, what if after we get this thing home, even after we do a pre-buy, we've got to do X, Y, and Z to the airplane. Maintenance needs to be taken care of. What if the market takes a downturn and now all of a sudden we're holding this thing for an extra 3 or 4 months? And we've got all those fixed expenses that you, by the way, don't have anymore, as the seller. You're done with it. So that all eats away that margin. So the key is obviously that there's enough money left over that it makes it worth our while to do it, and it's not putting us in an upside down situation, which occasionally can happen. Depending on a variety of things, you can have a scenario where it was either a bad buy on our part, or maybe the market took a turn or something. Maybe we just didn't give ourselves enough money to work with there, and now all of a sudden we're looking at a negative situation. So there's lots of variables there, and it's people say, well, you're going to turn this thing and sell it for such and such. Well, yeah, but you go out and sell it too, and you're going to go through a pre-buy, and you're going to have all these other additional items that are going to start costing you money, and pretty soon it starts looking like less and less of a lucrative deal for us than it did on the beginning.
But so you might ask the question, well, why even go the direction of selling it? I mean, selling it to a dealer. I think the first and foremost thing is just time, because, and the second thing, and they're related, is hassle, because more time is more hassle. So if you have an aircraft and you call us and we can act on it, it's not going to be instantaneously. This is not an overnight process, but over the course of a couple weeks, you're going to know if you have the asset that you say you have, then, and you tell us that, and that may be okay, there's something wrong, but that's all right. You've disclosed it, you've been upfront. If that's the case, then I think we can move fairly quickly. I think if we know what to expect, I think you can expect to get a fair offer and a fair price out of the airplane,
right?
And ultimately
reduce your fixed expenses
and move the process along, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not. Eric and I were out looking, and I've been looking for a truck, and so we're looking at it. Okay, do we sell a car? Do we just buy a truck and keep both? Do we trade it in? And the reality is, with the cars that we have, if I traded it in, I'll probably lose, I don't know, $3,000 to $4,000 on the deal if I trade it in. But lose is in quotes, because I'm not sure at the end of the day that's what's really going to happen. I'm going to get the car, we're going to get it done that day. I'm going to get this off of my chest, out of my mindset. It's going to be something less that I'm dealing with. We're going to get the car that we want. Now somebody else has got the other one. They have to deal with it. Actually, it's a good car. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's theirs now, and they don't have to, or I don't have to deal with it. They've got it. So there's lots of intangibles, especially when you start looking at what is your time worth, what's the hassle worth. If I do it myself, what are we going to deal with? Well, you can put it on Facebook Marketplace, you can put it on Craigslist. I go set it down there like we did the last one in the parking lot with a sticker on it.
It's important to mention that you live in a little bit of a rural area, as do I. So you're not going to be able to. People aren't coming out to your house,
right? Nor do I want them to come out to my house.
Yeah.
So, so you got all these other things you got to deal with, and at the end of the day, it's maybe it takes me an extra 6 or 8 hours. Well. Depending on your situation, you may be better off to spend those 6 or 8 hours doing something else. And again, I think people overlook that hassle factor that you brought up.
Well, and then if you're in a fairly remote airport area or area of the country with your airplane, which is a good reason, by the way, to own an airplane, because you're in a fairly, gosh, where did we sell that Bonanza out in western Nebraska? What
Alliance, wasn't it?
Was it Alliance? I mean, that's a long way out there, and you're going to have to find people that are willing to come out and see an airplane that's hundreds of miles, if not thousands of miles from where they are. So,
and at the very least, hundreds of miles from a commercial location where they can rent a car and drive and all this.
So, unless you happen to have a local buyer, that's just another reason to kind of get it off of your property.
Yeah. And
we come see airplanes at significant distances away. So,
there's scenarios too where it would make sense for you as the seller to do this. So sometimes we've run into people who maybe they have an annual inspection coming up and they just don't want to do it. Well, we can tie that in with our own pre-buy and do that. And so then all of a sudden they're saving X amount of dollars, probably at least $2 or $3 grand, if not a lot more, on doing an annual. Sometimes it's, hey, I've got a hangar lease that I don't want to renew.
Yes.
And I don't want to have to pay for that. Sometimes it is my insurance is coming up, and your insurance folks will tell you generally, well, you'll get some of that money back. Well, that money is not prorated on a straight line. It's very heavily weighted in favor of the house, of the insurance company. And so you pay a $3,000, $4,000 premium and you cancel it 3 days into it, guess what? You ain't getting $3,000 or $4,000 back. You're going to get a fraction of that back.
A lot, the hangar one that you mentioned a moment ago, that one really does resonate because a lot of times it's a discount to pay your hangar lease 6 months or 12 months at a time.
Oh, sure,
so now you're thinking either I'm going to pay more on a month-to-month lease, or in some cases these hangars are in such demand that some of these airports can effectively force you into that because they know they've got a list of 25 people waiting on a hangar, and they kind of want to satisfy those people. And so, well, if you're not, so it's just nice to get that off your plate.
It is. There's some definite advantages, but we want to look at this in a balanced way.
Yes.
And there's times when it doesn't make sense, and we get that. So, Todd, you've already touched on a couple of them, but what else can you think of?
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention was a trade. Well, a lot of guys will say, "Well, I'd like to trade my airplane." Why is that an unrealistic point in aviation?
I'm glad you brought that up. So, the question boils down to, what's a trade, right? How are you defining the word trade?
Yeah. So when I'm the airplane owner, and I've got a maybe something like a Baron, and I just kind of want to downsize. Maybe I want a 172 or a Warrior or something, because I want my son to learn to fly, and I'm not really using my Baron anymore. Now, how often do you think that is going to align where I'm going to trade a Baron for somebody's 172?
Right, yeah, almost never.
Exactly.
Almost never.
The answer is probably never.
Yeah. Yeah, don't, I mean, it's not, it's the point where it's not even worth considering that, because while on the surface you might have two things that are similarly aligned where it would make sense, the reality of is getting both of those people to the point where they're actually interested in each other's airplanes, the way they are equipped, the way they have been maintained. You really start losing interest of either or both parties at that time.
Airplanes are so individualized between all the things that affect the value that it's just impossible to line up.
Right.
So,
well, and on your trade thing, we'll get calls and several a week, and it's funny because when people talk about, and we hit on this a little bit ago, when they talk about trading in a car, hey, I would think at this stage in life, if you're an airplane owner, you understand that you take a car in and you trade it in. Guess what? There's that margin there that the dealer has got to make on your car to make it work.
Right.
He's not in the business. He's not out there just, hey, this is my hobby and I'm taking these cars in on trade and helping you out. That's not what they're there for. And so just like an airplane, I'm always amazed at these guys that they say, well, I'd like to trade for this or that, and they expect the money to be equal on both sides.
Retail to retail.
Retail to retail. And I just kind of shake my head and that's not the way it works. We're in this as a business like any other business, and while we love airplanes and we love helping people out, at the end of the day, just like you, we have to put bread on the table. And
so let's say we have a Saratoga on the and we're brokering it for another guy,
right?
And you own a PA-28, a Cherokee 180 or something of that nature, and you've been thinking about upgrading to that Saratoga. How could we make that transition, or that transaction, I should say, work? How could we facilitate that transaction so that the Saratoga owner does not want he's moving up to a Mirage. He doesn't want your Cherokee. So how can we at Wild Blue make that?
Right. Well, it's like what you talked about first, Todd. If it's something that we would be interested in, we can buy that airplane, and then we'll sell you the other airplane from the owner. So we don't actually have to own that airplane to help it be essentially a trade for you.
Right.
Is that what you're getting at there?
That is.
Yeah.
That is, yes.
So we can make that work, and it's from your perspective, it's like any other trade. But what you're doing is you're selling us your airplane, we're buying, and you're buying the other one, and we make the transaction happen essentially simultaneously.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the other key point. It can happen simultaneously. So the money or the proceeds from your aircraft is going to right away go toward the purchase of that new Saratoga,
Right.
used Saratoga.
And that may help you tax-wise, depending on what you're trying to do. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Yep.
I do think that's something that is worth one of the sort of reasons why you may want to sell an airplane at
Right.
wholesale. Another thought I think is, and this may not really help with any of our listeners, but maybe the scenario where there's the actual aircraft owner has passed away.
Oh, that's a good one.
And
That's a good one.
and now you are suddenly find yourself owning an airplane that you don't know the first thing about, don't want to own, realizing now you're writing a check for hangar and insurance and so on, or maybe worse yet, forgetting to insure it, and
Right.
now it's sitting there unprotected. Those are scenarios where we would love to help, and I gotta say, I hope this goes without saying, but this is not about taking advantage of anyone. It's still being fair.
Well, the numbers are all disclosed. Everybody
Yeah.
knows exactly what's
Yeah.
going on.
They're-
And I say that's the way we do it. And I
Yeah.
can't speak for others, but you're going to see what the numbers are, and you get to make the decision on, hey, is this the right scenario for me, right?
Right, and I do think that's a really a solid. If any of our listeners, if you ever run across that scenario, at least have the individual give us a call. We'd be happy to talk about it. Now we are not going to buy an airplane that's in pieces, or a project, or an airplane that sat in a hangar for the last 22 years. We are not set up to do that. That kind of an airplane probably should go to some kind of a maintenance shop. Maybe they can salvage it, but Chris and I are not in that position.
And most others are, unless that's their specialty, they're probably not going to do that either. Can I go down a rabbit trail on something you mentioned a minute ago?
Yeah.
Just because this is important, I think. So you mentioned that somebody dies, they pass away, they leave an airplane, and just a simple concept here, but it gets past so many people that they just don't understand. And that is, unlike a car, if this happens and you're in this situation, that value of that airplane is only going to go down the longer it sits there. Right. So you can have a classic car out in the garage, and 3 years from now, there's still going to be a lot of buyers for that car. They're going to love that car. You cannot do that with an airplane. No. The longer that thing sits, the smaller the buyer's pool gets, because the longer it sits, the more maintenance issues it's going to have with it. And so if you're thinking that, hey, we'll we'll wait for a year or two, I would encourage you not to do that, because it's not gonna bode well. Obviously get past the grieving process as much as you can, but don't let that airplane sit around a long time, and certainly don't let it get to where it's unairworthy and the inspections expire.
No, that's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's not going to do anyone any favor, and people start to worry about the minutia, I would guess, on the value of something like that. And they're just hurting themselves in the long run, because the value is, you find someone that's honest to give you a value, and not optimistic, but just honest. And
right.
And I think you'll be better off to part ways with it sooner rather than later.
I think at one point in time, I have to go back and look this up, but I think at one point in time, did we not do a podcast on, selling an airplane when you're kind of in that bereavement place?
I think we did. We did talk about that. Yes.
Yeah, because that's so important, and we've been through so many of them. And I'll tell you, that's something that we have learned over the years, to really learn a lot more about the specific situation before we get into it, because
right.
Emotions run so high, irrationality runs so high, and so it's just kind of a tricky position to be in.
What is the disadvantages? Because I mean, we want to be fair. What's the disadvantages to selling us your airplane? It's a good airplane. I'm assuming this is not from our perspective. Everything works. Everything's good. It's a good airplane. There might be a market for the airplane. What's the disadvantage?
Well, it's a lot of it's going to come down to the money, the margin that we have to make on the airplane. If you're still flying it actively and you're in a great location, and there's no reason for you to have to purchase or to sell the airplane, to a dealer. You can either sell it yourself, or even better, just work with a broker to help them sell it for you at a higher retail level. You'll net more at that point. I think that's where most of our customers come in. But occasionally we get these folks that they're just done with it. So I think that's the number one. What else do you have in mind?
No, I'm thinking that's about it. The only disadvantage that I can really see is just probably a little less money in your pocket.
Yeah.
As to what the airplane was worth.
I found some people, when they decide to sell, man, they have made that they have detached emotionally and everything else from that airplane. And when they've made that decision, just different personality types, they're ready to just see it go. They're just, hey, I just want to be done with it. Just do what you can to help me wipe my hands clean, and let's make this an all-in process where I can get it done all in one fell swoop, and I'm done.
Yep.
I don't have to worry about it anymore.
I would agree, and I think that's why ultimately the money in your pocket, that's part of that, is just the value of the time and the peace of mind that the airplane is going to a good scenario right now. I mean, it's not. There's no long drawn out death to this. It's just move it along and know that we'll take it from there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you have, if you got an airplane, is there anything else you want to say before I wrap this up?
I think we've covered it. It's just want to make people think about it because we're definitely interested. We'd love to talk to you about it. So
that's exactly what I was going to say. We'd love to talk to you. If you have, have an airplane that you're considering a situation like this, whether it's brokerage, which we would like to talk to you, or whether it is a wholesale opportunity where you're just wanting to sell the airplane, or maybe it's a combination of the two. And so maybe you're willing to give the process a little bit more time and want to broker it out. And we're happy to discuss a scenario where, hey, if the airplane doesn't sell within whatever the time frame is that you really need to get it sold, we will make you that offer. If it's an airplane, keep in mind we're not going to make it on every airplane, but if it's an airplane that if it's our profile, we'd certainly do that and say, okay, it didn't sell. We're not able to get this number here. You wanted to get moving. We'll give you this number here, and we're ready to help you out. So we can do it either way, or we can do it both ways.
And if as a listener, if you know somebody that might be in this situation, that's another, you might be doing them a favor. Of an airplane sat a little while, not years, but a little while or something like that, certainly steer the owner our direction, and we'd be happy to at least investigate the possibility of buying that airplane and getting it back in the air where it belongs.
Yep. That's exactly right. And so you can reach Todd at 888-773-4249. That's a good number for both of us. He's at Todd at flywildblue.com. I'm at Chris at flywildblue.com. And so give us a holler, and we'd love to chat with you. We'll exchange texts or whatever it is that we need to do. And by all means, please make sure you subscribe and share the podcast. We appreciate you listening.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Blue Podcast. Find us online at flywildblue.com. And don't forget to subscribe and share.